Good morning, First Baptist Church family. I'm extremely excited to be with you this morning for our virtual Sunday school. This morning, we will be looking at the text of Matthew chapter 15, starting in verse 21. Over the last couple of weeks, we've looked at a couple of texts in the book of Matthew. Last week, I believe we looked at a text in Matthew chapter 14. And so this week is going to kind of build off of that in Matthew 15. And so I'm going to be reading from the NRSV translation, which is what we use in our Sunday morning service. So if you would like, please go ahead and turn there, and I will begin reading in verse 21. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from the region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that have fallen from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. Like I said, this morning we're going to be looking at this short passage in Matthew chapter 15. And through my studies and through studies of other people and commentaries, I've come across some really interesting things with this passage. This morning, I will probably challenge some of you. Some of you will probably be caught off guard by what I'm about to share. But I think it's important for us to look at different perspectives and to understand more than just Jesus being the Son of God. And so obviously the woman in this passage is a Gentile, which is very important to this passage. So the first thing I want to point out to you, though, about that is this is all taking place during Jesus' time in Galilee. And so chapters 14 through 17 are focused on Jesus withdrawing from Galilee, from the ministry in Galilee. And so he withdraws, just like we've talked about in previous studies. Jesus is withdrawing to rest. He's not leaving to go witness to the people of on the shoreline, or to the people in Phoenicia, which is where Tyre and Sidon are at. On a map would be historically in Phoenicia. And so Jesus is not going to these places to go witness to people, to go heal people. Jesus is going to these places to rest. But yet we see him going there and people coming up to him and recognizing him and saying, "Lord, Son of David." And we know through reading the New Testament, especially the Gospels, that it took the disciples a little while to understand that Jesus was a prophet. And then when they understood that he was a prophet, it took them even longer to recognize him as the Messiah. And we really don't see that until this kind of part of the book of Matthew is kind of in the middle here, going into the later chapters of this section, verses chapters 18 and 19, is where we really start to see them refer to him as the Messiah. So we see Jesus leaving to go rest. And this woman comes up to him, who's a Gentile. She's from Phoenicia, from Tyre and Sidon. And she calls him the Son of David. And so one thing that is very fascinating is the fact that the disciples still have not called out to him as the Messiah. Maybe they're starting to recognize it, but they've not called out to him as the Messiah. And so this woman comes up who's from what they call Canaan. She's a Canaanite woman, and so Canaanite is not used anywhere else in the New Testament. Canaanite is an Old Testament term. There is no land of Canaan anymore in the New Testament, and so this term, scholars believe Matthew used to be kind of dramatic, to say, hey, this woman, not only is she not from a Jewish nation, but she's an enemy. She's an enemy to the Jews, and we don't like her. She's not somebody that we affiliate ourselves with. And so he uses the word Canaanite. She's a Canaanite woman. But she lives out in this kind of backwoods, out of the way, not somewhere that Jews go. And somehow she's heard enough about this man named Jesus to recognize him as the son of David, something that even the disciples have not completely accepted yet. And so she's calling him the son of David, and she asks him to exorcise a demon out of her daughter. And we see at first, and this is kind of a human side of Jesus, kind of the side of Jesus that sometimes we forget about or we refuse to accept. We want to think that Jesus was always the Son of God and always doing miracles and always being this perfect individual, and he was. But he was also human. And so I think sometimes we forget about the emotions that we have as humans. And I think that a lot of times in our Bible stories, we forget to express the emotions that Jesus may have had. And so in this passage right here, I think we kind of see that come out. Some people read this and they say Jesus was racist. Some people read this and they say, well, if all it takes is having faith, why did my husband die? Why did my brother die? Why did my sister or wife or mother? And so we see these questions being asked because this Gentile, who was an outsider, had enough faith that Jesus healed her daughter. And so people kind of look at this as an offensive passage. Like I said, either saying Jesus is racist or saying, why not me? You know, if that's all it takes, was I not enough? And so we see this response from Jesus. And at first, he's just kind of ignoring it. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I was in a car ride this past week, and this guy kept saying random things. And so we had the windows down and we had music on, and he was in the back seat, and he kept saying things. And it got to the point where I was just like, man, I'm going to ignore him because I can't hear him anyway. And so we get that way as humans, to the point where we're just tired of listening. And I think that's kind of where Jesus was at. He was withdrawing from Galilee to go basically retreat and to just take a break and to breathe. And this woman comes up and she's begging him, Jesus, Jesus, Son of David, help my daughter who is possessed by a demon. And Jesus doesn't answer. And he just keeps on his way. And she keeps crying out. And we see in verse 23, the disciples begin to say, Jesus, come on, man. Send her away. We're tired of hearing her cry. We're tired of hearing her beg. Get her out of here. And this is not the first time that the disciples have done something like that. When Jesus fed the multitudes, we also saw them say the same thing. It's not our responsibility, Jesus. Send them away. Send them into town. Let them eat there. And Jesus said, no, give me the bread, give me the fish. And he broke it and fed the multitudes. Later on, we're going to see Jesus feed another group of people. So I think it's interesting to put this story in between feeding the two groups, because the first group, what many of you may not recognize, is the first group was Jewish. The first group was already believers. Maybe not what we would consider Christians, but they were in that community. Like Jesus said in verse 24, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so we see Jesus make this kind of concerning comment. He says, I was only sent for the children of Israel. And so that is what we see in that first gathering of the multitudes, is Jesus feeding children of Israel. In the second one, we see it a little differently. He's feeding Gentiles. He's feeding just this huge dispersed group of people, which is, I think, 4,000 plus the children and women that were there. And so we're probably talking 8, 9, 10,000 people again. And he's feeding them the same way that he fed the multitude in the first story. And so that passage that I just read is where people kind of say, man, Jesus was racist. And it's understandable. Like, that makes sense for somebody who may not understand the ministry, may not understand what's going on here. It could come across as Jesus saying, hey, the Gentiles are not worth it. But at the same time, like I said, when we appeal to the human side of Jesus, and we understand that right now his ministry is in Galilee, and he's trying to get away from ministry. He's trying to relax and just take a breather and to recoup so that he can go back, because Galilee is torn apart right now. There's so much controversy. There's so much going on there. And Jesus just wants to rest. And here's this woman coming up, and I could see him being frustrated again, especially looking at the characteristics of a man like myself. When I'm outside working and I'm, getting hot and sweaty, and whether it be mowing or whatever, or I come and do a speaking engagement, and then I have people come up just bombarding me with questions, I can get short, and I can be offensive and push people away and say, hey, I'm just not in the mood right now. And so I think that that's probably what's going on here. I don't think that Jesus was necessarily racist, but I can understand where people may get that impression. But I think it was more of him just being tired and frustrated and saying, hey, I need a break. I've only come to do the work in Galilee. This is my relaxation. But it goes on, and she challenges him. And so, so something that a lot of early readers and writers and people during this time, something that they enjoyed was people with quick wits. And so they liked people who could just snap back. And we do too. So she does. And she says, but even the dog eats the crumbs from the master's table. And so something about that, Jesus calls her a dog and says, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. So he's referring to the children as the children of Israel. And he's calling everybody else a dog. And I know we still use this term. We still call people dogs in modern day. But I just want to look at that word for a second. Traditionally, during this timeline, the word dog was a harsh insult for both men and women. And it was used negatively and associated with dung, promiscuity, devouring of corpses. So this was a bad term. This was not something that you wanted to be likened to. And here Jesus is using this term. I can think of plenty of terms in today's culture that we use and we shouldn't use, but we use these terms to define a group of people or to label a certain person because they are not like us. And so we see Jesus challenging that here. We see him saying, it's not okay to take the food from the table and give it to these people who are not like us, these outsiders. And this woman snaps back and she says, but even the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table. And that's when we see Jesus kind of change his attitude and change his response. And he says, woman, you have great faith. Your daughter's healed. Go back to her. And so I think this is very important for us to look at because when we think about ministry, when we think about what it means to be the church, what it means to have outreach, what it means to open our doors, sometimes I think we can get caught up in the idea of, I've only been called to this specific group. As a minister, I've only been called to witness to the youth. As a minister, I've only been called to work with the children or to lead the church as a whole, the grown-up church. And I think we do a really good job here at First Baptist with this, but at the same time, I think it's still a challenge for everybody. We have our faults and issues here. And I think this is a reminder for us to say, to just look at our ministry and say, God, who are the dogs that we've created? Who are the people that are not like us, that we've pushed out, that we've kicked away? I read one article about this verse that was actually posted in the Huffington Post, and the lady was talking about the way that the American culture, especially Christian culture, has responded to Muslims. And just the idea of kind of this quote that was there was, all I need to know about Muslims, I learned in 9/11. And the response to that was, what if a group of people stood outside of our church, stood outside of First Baptist here in Erwin, on the road, on the corner of Main and Love, and they stood outside with picket signs that read, all I need to know about Christians, I learned about from Terry Jones. Or even more so from the Crusades, or we can go on and on. There are plenty of people who have done things in the name of Christianity that don't represent who Jesus is. And so I think this is a challenge for us to stop labeling people, to stop putting people in categories, and to recognize that Jesus came to allow everyone to be a child of God. He allowed everyone to be a child of Israel. And so his ministry doesn't stop when he leaves Galilee. We can see this frustration. We can see this kind of unwillingness to perform this miracle at first. But he still does it. And so we see him, even in his time of rest, even on his time off, when this woman comes to him, as much as he doesn't want to do it, we see him perform this miracle. And I think that's important for us. I think it's important for us to remember, even on our day off, even when we think people aren't looking or following, even when we just want to escape and run away from it all, if the opportunity presents itself, we should still be witnesses of Jesus. And at the same time, we also see Jesus practicing rest. And so it's good for us to remember to have rest and to seek out a retreat, like what's referred to here. Um, so a couple other things that I want to point out before I go um, is the disciples' response. And so we see the disciples say, "Send her away." So they're tired too. Um, and that's kind of another layer to this. Another response is the disciples saying, "We are done. Send her away." And Jesus never really says for her to leave, but he doesn't answer her. And so when we see that unresponsiveness, we see the disciples say, "Send her away, get her out of here." We know that everybody here is tired. The disciples are so tired of hearing people um, being critical and challenging what they're doing and challenging Jesus and saying, "Jesus, heal me." And so I think it's also important to look at this and to say, how often do we do that? How often do we just, um, in our minds or out loud, how often do we just say, "Jesus, send these people away. Get this person out of in front of me. I can't handle it anymore." Um, and really, what that person needs is to see the love and the light of Jesus. And so that's my challenge, or challenges for us this week, First Baptist, um, is to look at those groups that we've labeled. Look at the people who, when they get in front of us, we just can't take it. The people that are different from us, and to see, what we're withholding from them. Are we withholding an opportunity to be the light and be the salt of the earth? Are we withholding happiness from people? Are we withholding happiness from ourselves by looking at these people and saying, "You're not like me, and I don't want you here"? Uh, I'm trying to rest. This is my day off. Um, so just examine that in yourself, and I'm going to be doing the same. Um, but I think that all in all, this passage really just shows um, the humanness of Jesus and the fact that Jesus had to rest, and that sometimes, as we can probably see here, Jesus may have been frustrated and didn't want to help people, but he still did. He still did the work that was needed. Um, I'm so glad that you joined me this morning. I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to look at this verse or this passage. Um, I can't wait to see you guys this morning in worship. Um, and if not, I hope that you will join us again right here on YouTube and Facebook. Um, I know Kobe is going to be teaching on this passage, and I can't wait to see where he goes with it. Thank you. I'm so glad that you are here. Please pray with me. Father, I just thank you for this opportunity to look at your word and to just dive in a little deeper and look at the context and the differing opinions and the viewpoints, and just kind of seeing all it is that you have given us, this book to life. It's kind of like a book for how to live Christ-like for dummies. And so, God, I thank you for giving us the ability to just openly read this and to study your word and to gather in your name, God. And even when we can't gather in person, you've given us the ability to join together on the internet and to reach out to people that sometimes we wouldn't have the ability to reach out to. And so, God, I thank you for that. I pray that you would just use us as willing vessels, God, and just let us be the salt and light of the earth. And even when we're tired, even when we're frustrated, I pray that you would just remind us what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, God. I pray all of these things in your name. Amen.